Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. It's 10:30, so let's get going. We have a lot to get to, as you guys can probably imagine. Really quickly, I see so many faces that I saw on Monday or I saw on Tuesday, so it was really good to see you guys. I had 2 meetings and 2 days of in-person meetings, and it was kind of like, oh, back on virtual today. But it was really good to see you guys. And everybody's gotten their questions in, and I'm super appreciative of that because we've really been able to do some work behind the scenes leading up to this meeting, just to make sure that we get you guys the right information. So with that being said, we have, of course, our TEIS leadership on today, as well as some other folks from DIDD that are going to help us out and get you guys some great answers. So we will go ahead and get into it. Licensure and the Title VI survey are big on the list. We're going to get a couple of questions that aren't about those two things out of the way first, and then we'll dive into that stuff. So let's go ahead and get started with our questions that were pre-submitted. Jill, I don't see you on here, but if you are here, we'll go ahead and get to those.
I am on. I'm not sure.
Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Let me go find your sweet face on here somewhere. Okay, I just didn't see you. I usually see you. Okay, let's go. Number 1, will TEIS be providing each EIRA EIs with AEPS 3 when it comes out like they have been with AEPS 2?
We are still in discussion with Brooks Publishing. I know that you guys are receiving lots of emails. We are receiving lots of emails too, because they're getting ready to roll that out. But we have been in contact with our sales rep, as well as the individuals that work with us in the APSI system and training and all that. So that is not officially ready to roll out yet. So there will be more coming. I can't say for sure that this is, today that yes, we are going to do this. We don't have all the information from Brooks Publishing yet. So there will be more to come on that piece.
Okay, I think this next one probably has a similar answer. I just want to make sure it gets read. Will there be training sessions on the updates that have been added to be able to use AEPS 3?
Yes, that will all be part of the rollout when we have determined how AEPS 3 is going to roll out. So that will be a part of it.
Okay, our next question is about the family survey. So we're going to have Shannon Fargen answer this one for us. Shannon, is there any feedback the state can provide about the family survey? Many families don't seem to understand the questions, and then many seem to overrate themselves.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so just as a reminder, we do 2 separate family surveys. So I believe this question is related to the 4 questions that early interventionists ask when they are conducting the AEPS. And so these are 4 questions that are written in a way for families to self-reflect. And so those are written in a way that the EI should record the family's response as is, but may want to make notes of any gaps between the family's rating and the EI's experiences with the family. We are, just experiencing perhaps a small window of the family's entire experience, especially over the past year when we've been delivering services via teleconference. So that's just an area for exploration and conversation with the family, perhaps keeping an eye open as you're delivering services and seeing maybe where that difference is happening. I would also say it's also an opportunity for EIs if families aren't understanding the question, that might be an opportunity in your staff meetings to have some conversations about ways that you've explained it or things that have worked or not worked, or to observe each other, or for supervisors to observe and see what's working or not working. Those would be my recommendations.
Shannon, thank you so much. We were able to share some family survey numbers with SICC, and I know with the EIRAs these past couple of days, and our service coordinators have really just done an amazing job of getting those, as have you, Shannon. That's gone way up this past year. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that's for the annual family survey.
Yeah.
So it gets confusing when we're talking about two processes. They do go hand in hand, and I do want to say we are working to, the reason we have the two processes, we are working to build those bridges, get the information more timely than the once annual survey, and start to build that bridge between what we're seeing with our early childhood outcomes and our family outcomes and build those connections. So great work, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. A couple more general questions. Jill, we'll head back to you. Has the policy changed with families referred by DCS? We seem to have more families that have been referred by DCS who are not allowed to decline services, even if the foster parent has no concerns.
Mute. There has this is not a policy. This is driven from IDEA. Tennessee's early intervention system is a voluntary program. Of course, we would like to have as many children who could receive our services and are eligible for our services to participate, but it is still a voluntary program, and we do not. It's voluntary for the parents, the caregivers, the foster parent. We don't differentiate who can and who can't decline. This question pops up every so often. I don't know if it's changing DCS staff or things like that. And DCS very much wants the children to participate in our services, and I'm very thankful for that. But sometimes there is just not on the same page between the DCS caseworker and the foster parent about if that child has delays or if there is any suspicion of delays. So really need to support that relationship between the foster parent and that case manager, that they can have those conversations and they can come to an agreement on when a child should be referred, and so the foster parent doesn't have this feeling of being pressured, but that we're reinforcing that relationship between those entities and providing support where we can.
All right, Jill, thank you. One more general question. In a previous office hours, a question was asked about how many co-therapy visits a DT could have per year per child. Jill indicated she would get back to us. Has an answer been determined? If we can have co-therapy visits, can they occur during ABA? Many of our families are getting a lot of ABA, and finding a visit time around that schedule is difficult.
Thank you for bringing this question back up. Now that we are moving back in a face-to-face environment, and there are plans for people moving into that, others have moved in 100%, that we will go back to what we had originally discussed when, pre-COVID, 6 visits per child per year can be used, with another provider on that child's IFSP, and you can count that service as a developmental therapy service.
All right, Jill, thank you so much. We are now going to get into licensure questions. We've got a lot to get to. Some of these questions, they don't go into the full explanation of what they're talking about. They just list the number, which is totally fine. You may just want to have that self-survey if you want to kind of follow along and reflect. We have with us to talk about these questions, Dave Harrell. He is our Director of Licensure and Risk Management. Dave, are you there this morning?
Yes, good morning.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for being here. We'll go ahead and jump right into it. First questions. Our first question, new guideline 6.61A3, a list of advocacy services. What is this?
Well, the first thing I'd like to clarify is that these are not new guidelines. These have all been in place since 2016, at least. But I realize that they may be somewhat new to y'all because of the process that has changed. But anyway, these advocacy services are going to be things that you need to develop on your own. It's not something we can give you because they need to be geographically specific. There's not one list that would work for the whole state or even for an entire region. And if you're part of an agency that serves adults, they already have a list. It probably will need tweaking to make it specific to the population that you serve. In other words, children up to 3 as opposed to adults. But I'm sure that most of you have know what kind of advocacy services are available in your area, and that list just needs to be available to families in case they need them.
Thanks, Dave. 20.2.1, are we responsible for this as an EI or a vendor?
Just for EIs, so that's all. Vendors
Okay.
are not.
Okay. 20.02.2, 3, and 4, is the point of entry office required to get this annual physical report from the MD?
Yeah, the point of entry obtains this as part of the IFSP, and then the contractors have access to this within TEIS.
All right, 20.033 is the TB screening it's talking about. Is the screening adequate for the staff, or do they have to go to the doctor for a test?
They definitely do not have to go to the doctor for a test unless the screening indicates that they need to follow up. So once I'm a former nursing home administrator, so I know about these TB tests pretty well. If you have contracted the TB virus, you will always test positive for the rest of your life. And so if you test positive on this the 2-step TB test, then it will indicate that you need to go to your doctor, who will do a chest x-ray to just confirm that you do not in fact have an active case of TB, and that's what's necessary there. So no use bothering your doctor unless the test comes back positive.
All right, thank you, Dave.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I do have a follow-up question for that. So if you do know that you always test positive and you've already had a negative chest x-ray, are we required to get a chest x-ray every year?
Yes.
Even though every year. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Thelma. We have a couple requests to slow down, so I apologize. I didn't mean for it to get to be like a lightning round. We will go to the next question, 20.4. Is there a seizure course on Relias? And does this apply to home sessions or just center-based?
There are 2 different seizure courses on Relias. One is probably going to be more applicable to this population, but I'll let y'all decide that. And it does apply to both settings. And the other thing I want to make sure you understand is you do not have to get your training from Relias. That is an available resource, but as long as the training is obtained, it doesn't matter what source, as long as it's reliable.
Okay, thank you, Dave. 20.3.5. Are home-based early interventionists and vendors required to have first aid and CPR?
Yes. As you can imagine, we understand that the family will be with you in the home, but we want to make sure that personnel are trained in these just in case it's needed.
Thanks, Dave. Next question, 20.3.5. Oh, I just did that one. I'm sorry. A lot of numbers. 20.091. Are we responsible for the monthly summary besides notes entered on TEIS?
At this point, we're thinking that the monthly notes that are entered in TEIS will suffice for this.
Thanks, Dave. Next question, 20.10. If in a parent's home and they use restrictive behavior management, what is our responsibility?
So these licensure rules apply to the responsibilities of staff and providers, and we cannot dictate the responsibilities of parents. So I hope that answers the question. And also, if you do see something that is egregious with a parent, just be cognizant of your responsibility to report that to Child Protective Services.
Thank you, Dave. Next question, under section 6.05, written acknowledgement that the person supported has been informed of the rights and responsibilities. Would a copy of the signed signature page meet this requirement, or do we need something agency specific?
Lauren, I lost track of you. Okay, let me see. The IFSP document is acceptable here.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving along, under section 20.02, is there a specific form we need for proof of immunizations? If they are listed in TEIS, do we need a copy in our file?
It's still the agency's responsibility to have a copy, even though it's in TEIS.
All right, next question, section 20.024. The home-based EIRA must require that each child supported receives immunizations as required by the Tennessee Department of Health unless contradicted by a doctor's written order. If yes, is there a designated form we are to use?
No, all formats are accepted. I do want to elaborate on this and the previous question just a little bit. We are not requiring vaccines. A statement from the doctor saying that the parents, that he discussed it with the parents and they ought not to receive the vaccines is fine. So what we don't want to hear is a whole lot of pushback from doctors saying, wait, why is DIDD licensure requiring vaccines when the parents may not want them? And that is not what we're doing here.
All right, thanks, Dave. Next question, section 20.04, home community-based EIRAs are to collect and maintain records documentation of all drugs prescribed or administered by the licensee to the child supported, which indicates date prescribed, type, dosage, frequency, amount, and reason for children. So I guess if we could just kind of explain that a little bit more about what that is, the documentation there.
So this is required at the time of the IFSP, and what we're looking for is the previous 6 months worth of data that's required when you're writing the IFSP or modifying that. So it's not a continuous history of 6 months. I think I'm skipping a little bit ahead to question 19, but we need to probably take 17 under advisement and get a better answer, and we'll communicate that.
Yeah, and just we do have a question coming up that we can go ahead and get to, Dave. It's in section 20.06. The EIRA will conduct an update of medications assessments every 6 months. And you're just saying no, for the annual IFSP, they need to have the previous 6 months.
Correct.
All right. Next question, home community-based EIRAs are to document medical problems, accidents, seizures, and illnesses, and treatments for such medical problems and illnesses of the child supported. So they are supposed to document those things?
Yeah, in the service log, it will be fine for that documentation.
All right, our last pre-submitted question that we have regarding licensure, are these records permitted to be stored electronically?
not only are they permitted, that is encouraged. We really like electronic storage. We've had a few incidents here lately this past winter with pipes freezing and sprinklers going off and destroying a bunch of paper records. So we really like electronic records. Plus, it enables us at some point to maybe do virtual licensure visits instead of having to show up on your doorstep unannounced. We can just call you unannounced and maybe do some records reviews virtually like we had to do during the pandemic for all the other agencies.
All right, thanks, Dave. Now that's all for the pre-submitted questions. I apologize, I got going a little fast there. We do want to get to any other questions that you guys want to ask right now. I know, thank you, Jill, for hopping in on the chat box and answering a few things. Again, I know on our provider office hours, we have everybody here, but the licensure stuff is just for our EIRA, so vendors don't worry about that. And we are going to post this recording of this meeting today if you guys want to go back and listen to anything. But that being said, I'd love to get to any other questions.
Hi, I just want to get some clarification about some things in the chat box. So I guess I'm unclear about the vaccination conversation going on. So can someone provide some clarity there, whether the vaccination immunization records are needed or not? Because it seems as though in the licensure it does, but then in the chat it seems like it does not. So can someone please provide some clarity there?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, or thanks, Selma. I'm sorry, I was looking at Dave's name. Yeah, I know that we're saying under IDA Part C, it's not required. However, is that different for the Department of Health? We want to pop back up to question 16. And I think that was more about the format. But Dave, what about the immunizations?
Again, the licensure rule is clear that there has to be a statement about the immunizations. Whether or not it is a listing of the immunizations, it can just be a statement from the doctor that the parents do not want to have their child vaccinated. So we are not specifying any vaccinations that have to be listed on that format.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So just a general statement of immunization would suffice
If they
in the
have
child's digital file.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Jill, did you want to hop in and add anything on that?
Just in general, I spoke about this at the EIRA meeting on Monday, but some of you may have been here, are here today that weren't there then or weren't able to hear as well. This is a requirement that because we were in DOE, this is why you haven't heard about this in a while, because the agreement when we were in DOE is that if you had an active contract, executed contract with TEIS, you had deemed status and licensure with DIDD. We are now DIDD. Therefore, deemed status does not apply. And as an EIRA and as part of your contract, you are required to have DIDD licensure. These rules are what you have to meet to obtain that DIDD licensure. Myself, Renee Bard, Dave, his team have worked very closely the last couple of months to go through all of the licensure requirements that would apply to home, community, and center, and make sure that we had an understanding of, yes, this is how it's going to look for home and community. This is how it's going to look for center. Does it apply to both? Does it not? So I understand this is something y'all haven't had to do in a while, and you're kind of questioning why you should have to have some things. I understand that. But what I'm telling you is this has been worked through numerous times. These are licensure requirements. Your contract requires you to have licensure. This is something we're going to have to work through. And, you know, there are items that TEIS under IDEA does not require, in order for a child to be eligible for services and to receive those services. That doesn't mean that our contractors might not have licensure requirements that they have to meet in order to obtain and continue to receive a license that their contract requires. So you're going to see some differences there. And I welcome the questions. Believe me, I've had lots of questions. Dave and I and Renee and his team have worked through this numerous times. But I just want you to understand kind of the background of this and why we're where we are and what this means to you as a contractor and why it's different than what your POEs may be collecting.
Jill, it's Selma again. Thank you so much for that background and clarification. These licensures are actually pretty familiar for me because we had it for our center-based, but there are just like 2 or 3 that are a little bit different, which you just touched on, which is perfect, like this immunization thing. My follow-up question to that, though, is has there been some thought about how we approach parents about this? Because we, like right now in our center base, we currently are serving families where we've never mentioned having to have immunization status provided. And unfortunately, just given the climate of what's happened in the year, some families might just be a little bit sensitive about that. Not saying that we're talking about COVID, but just basic immunization status or just basic immunizations, because a lot of the kiddos in our center have not been to a childcare, so they haven't even been asked about that yet. So that's kind of where my brain is thinking about the immunization stuff.
So I think Dave covered it very well when he said, sorry, Dave, when he's like, it's a statement. And so,
Okay,
this
so
is
as long as
something
there's just something like,
you
my
need to
child
start
has-
incorporating into your conversations with families. It's just what you're going to have to do.
Okay.
And, you know, it's a statement.
Yeah.
So, in this instance, it's a statement.
Okay, so I just want to double check. So we have like enrollment packets. And so each family for center base gets an enrollment packet. And so we have all sorts of stuff like HIPAA, all of it. So in that enrollment packet, I could include a sheet of paper, a form or something, just like a statement, and that would suffice in our enrollment packet. So that way it's documented for every child.
First of all, I'd like to keep this dialogue open. Okay, as y'all start encountering this, let's hear about the situations that you're encountering and what kind of roadblocks you're receiving on this. Secondly, I think it's a good idea to have this conversation because parents are going to be asked these conversations in a couple of years when they go into the school system. So they need to at least be giving it some thought. And I think that's probably a service y'all can provide. But yes, a statement will suffice. I think what we would prefer to see is, something from the physician, but we're not laying down the law there. If all you can get is a statement that the parents, you've discussed this with the parents and they have not pursued immunization at this point, then that's acceptable for licensure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Really good questions. We have some questions about the medication question as well, which is similar. Jessica Beaver has a good question. Based on the medication response, does this require a formal medication record or can it just a list be given by the parents?
Just a list is fine.
Okay. Rosario asked, do you have any suggestions on how to work with medical practices to get this statement? Because it's extremely hard to get. I think we kind of covered that and it can come from the parents. And Jamie says, what's the procedure for families? And this is back to the medication list. If they're maybe uncomfortable giving the child medications to an EI or an EIRA because they don't administer the medicine, they might, be concerned about why we need that information.
From our perspective, Jill, and when we discussed this, we could envision lots of scenarios in which this information would be necessary, especially for contractors. As therapists come in, there are medications that would cause side effects that a therapist would really need to know about, especially with speech and physical therapy and occupational therapy too. So I think there's really good logic to why we would want to have this information. And I think it should be part of what you asked for when developing the IFSP. That said, is it worth, I think you do the best you can to get it from the family, and it's probably, I would not want it to be a barrier for the child getting services. That said, if we see a whole lot of family refuses, we're probably going to have to revisit this.
All right, thank you, Dave. Go ahead.
So do your best.
Renee, I know that you've added some comments, and there Renee Bart's on the call as well. Is there anything, because you've, as a former ERA director, than being on this side of things, any help you can give?
Yes. I've been on both sides of this, and sometimes as an ERA director, it was always beneficial for us to have our own copies of medical records. TEIS is going through those medical records looking for eligibility, but there's oftentimes much more information to be gleaned from those medical records and having access to those yourself as an ER director. So I strongly encourage people to go ahead and request those records yourselves. And in doing that, you can usually look through those medical records and get those medications that have been prescribed to children. And that gives you an opportunity also to maybe find something that a parent forgot to tell you or forgot to mention. And then those immunization records are usually in medical records, or you can request records from the local health department, wherever that child has received those immunizations. And based on the age of the child, will depend on how often you have to send to get that immunization record, or ask the family about whether or not it's been updated, because we know that infants, they're getting immunizations more frequently than that 2-year-old. And if you get children in at age 2, hopefully they've already had those beginning immunizations, and they're not as likely to need immunizations in the next year, perhaps. And if anybody has questions, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to help in any way with that.
Thank you, Renee. One question, is there a rubric or an audit tool that we can use to verify that we have everything needed in the client file?
So Jill sent that out, I think, to the ERAs earlier. Am I right, Jill?
Lauren sent that out to them.
Sorry, thank you. That's
Monday.
right. Okay, so that's pretty much an audit tool, and I hope that's what you're asking for.
Thank you, Dave. Is there a time frame on this when all of this needs to be completed?
Good question. And one of the things that we established several weeks ago with Jill is this first year, we know this is new to y'all, and to be honest, it's somewhat new to us also. We've been kind of out of the licensure loop because of the dean status for the past few years. And so this first year, we'll be doing more what I'd like to categorize as consultative surveys. So we'll be coming out to do your licensure survey, and unless there's something just very, very egregious, we're going to try our best to issue a license. So what we're looking for is that you've got processes, policies, and procedures in place to get all this information. And if, as in the chat question, if you don't have all 300 of children's immunization records in there, that's not going to be a reason for you to not be granted a license. I hope this answers the question, and it's a good one.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully it does. Thanks, Dave. Another question, if I get the medication information, am I supposed to log it into TEIS? How would a PT or OT know what medications the child receives unless it is in TEIS somewhere?
I'm going to defer to Jill or someone else on that one.
That's not something that we require to be put in there. I mean, you are required to have it as part of your licensure. If a therapy agency wants to have that information, then they will get that information.
Thanks, Jill. And we may have touched on this one before, but we required to get updated immunizations information every year? Or is this statement that they need to get just a one-time ask?
The medication information would be every year. They should be getting that as part of the IFSP, their last 6 months worth of meds.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And I see an 865 number with their hand raised. Thank you for doing that. That was nice. If you want to go ahead and unmute, go for it. I'll pause for you. They may have done that by accident. All right, I think we're going to move on from this. I think we've gotten to most of the questions. That being said, if anything else, okay, if anything else comes up, you guys can get to us. I'll pause again. I think Stacy Cornwall from Best has a question. Stacy, go ahead.
Thanks, Lauren. Just a quick question. We were working with Tabitha to work with licensing, and she gave us chapter 6 and chapter 20 to use as guidelines. We did not receive a chapter 5, but I just want to clarify that basically I can disregard what she had sent us. I just need to use the consolidated list, Lauren, that you sent out.
So the list Lauren sent out should be all inclusive. Are you saying it conflicts with what Tabitha had sent you?
It includes a chapter 5 that I didn't receive. Otherwise, it looks like it includes chapter 6 and 20. But I just want to be sure that this is the first time I'm seeing the policy written out like this. But it sounds like this is it going forward, regardless of maybe what we had received prior.
Let's have a different conversation with you and I and Tabitha, and we can get Jill and whoever else we need to on there to make sure, because
Okay,
I hate to just make a blanket statement. I really hate to make a blanket statement to disregard anything that Tabitha says, because she's usually right.
Okay, thanks for your time.
And Stacey, I can pop Dave's email in the chat in a moment, so you can copy everyone on that. Just go ahead and get that started. Thelma, go ahead. You've got your hand up too.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate and validate something that Dave had said, that this process is actually pretty reasonable. Our licensure coordinator, who I've met with twice now in the past 2 years, it's a lot. It seems like a lot, but she really, or at least she does. I don't know if she does everybody's, but she really does go through with you and point out if something needs fixed, and then you fix it, right? Like it's not as heart I feel like some people are really having a heart attack over it, but Dave kind of mentioned, like this is just to make sure you meet licensure. They're just going through and making sure everything's fine. And I just wanted to kind of back him up on that. And the process that we've gone through twice with, I hope I'm allowed to say her name, Heather Miles, has been very positive.
Good, thank you.
Hopefully that was some reassuring news to hear for the other people, because it is a lot and it is overwhelming. Thank you guys for that. Dave, I think we are all caught up on the questions. Is there anything else you want to mention before we move on to something else? I know we're going to be open for any other questions that people may have. This isn't their only time to get them answered, but anything before we move on?
No, I'll just say that I think we'll all be showing each other a lot of grace over the next year as we work through this, and bearing in mind that the goal here is just to serve these kids, and that's what our goal is, and we know that's what your goal is, and so we're not going to be at odds with each other. We're going to work together to make sure that goal is met. And yes, I see one last question came up. Each region does have a specific person from DIDD assigned to it's each region. And yes, you can talk to them. I'll put those names and email addresses in the chat by region.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. And yeah, and as he mentioned, Thelma mentioned Heather is the lady in the east that can help you out. Okay, we're going to move on. I know that was a lot.
Lauren,
yes.
it's Jessica Beaver. I have a
Hey.
really quick question for him before he jumps off. I'm an agency that our QA visit was put on hold because it was already supposed to happen. And so I'm assuming it's going to be rolling around relatively quick. I understand that you're stating that we're going to have some leniency as far as we might not have a lot of this information. And I'm an agency that has about 300 kids. So do you know when the time frame of when that'll be started and what the expectation is as far as me obtaining this information for our current children? Because it hasn't been a process in the past.
Okay, you said QA. I think you meant licensure. Is that right?
Yes, everybody.
Okay.
I know each agency calls it something different, but
There is a difference, but that's okay. So the licensure surveys, number one, they are unannounced. So they will show up at your agency unannounced, and they could start as soon as tomorrow. So if you're overdue, I would expect them pretty soon. They really should have started July 1, 2020, but there was a little thing, I don't know if y'all heard about it, but a little thing called COVID that kind of derailed us for a bit. And so we're obviously behind, but all these licenses have been put in extended status. And so that's where we are. And yes, I think what we will do, as I was trying to convey earlier, is we'll come in and see that you're starting the process. And I don't want to give a number. If you've got 300, I'm not going to say that we're going to look for 10% or 30, but we're just going to look for a process that has begun. Certainly, we are not going to, if we show up tomorrow, we're not going to expect you to have 300. Probably not even going to expect you to have 30, since this information is just now being shared. But at least we will probably want to just talk to you about what your process is. We haven't discussed this internally, but we do have at our disposal a tool in our tool belt is a provisional license that would, if things are not as good as we had hoped when we get there, we could give you a provisional license, we can make it good for a month or up to 6 months. That would require us to come back out, which is not something we want to do and not something you want us to do. But it is a tool that we have used. And a lot of times that comes up as a matter of physical environment. So let's say that you've got a giant hole out there on the playground at a center-based program, and that would cause you to not pass a licensure inspection. But we could issue a provisional one and put together a plan of correction. You would put together a plan of correction as to how you were going to get that fixed, and as soon as that was fixed, that provisional license would be changed to a permanent license, or not permanent, but regular license that would be good for the next year. So does that answer your question, Jessica? I like a nod of the head. That's good.
And a smile.
Yes.
I still can't breathe, but it's okay.
You still can't breathe. Did she not give you peace 1 minute ago telling you it wasn't all that bad?
All right. Before we move on, Tania Yo, our Chief of Staff, I think wants to say a few things. Tania?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So I want to acknowledge the fact that this is a lot for folks. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to wrap your head around. So Dave is probably used to me shocking him like this, but I'm going to ask Dave, I'll work with him to set up a separate time for us to meet with the EIRAs. We'll bring in some of those regional licensure folks and just have a more focused conversation about licensure to answer some questions you may have. It is a requirement, but we want you to be successful, of course, and we want to help you be successful. So we'll get that set up. I'll work with Dave and his team. We'll have our TEIS folks there. And I know we have some EIRAs who happen to also be providers on our 1915C side. So I think it might be a good idea if we pull some of those folks in too, so they can kind of talk about how they operate in regards to licensure and those sorts of things. So just wanted to let you guys know that is coming. This won't be the end of the conversation. We will be out to you in short order. So I'll work with Dave after this meeting.
All right, they are blessing your name across the state of Tennessee right now, Tania. Thank you very much. Let's get to Joan Kennedy too. She wants a little in on this conversation. Hey, Joan.
Hey everyone, just wanted, as I'm hearing all of this, and this is like week and a half, 2 into my return after being gone on retirement for 4 months. So this certainly is a lot of new information for me as well. And I'm certainly for our district offices, even though they're not under the licensure, we certainly are partners in this with you all. And so I just want to, you know, to me, this is an opportunity for us to work together and to, in the interest of IFSP development, work toward information and how we can provide information to you all, or at least to let you know about the information that we have. We use TEIS together, so utilizing that. But certainly in the future, maybe there are other avenues that we could use and discuss as how we share information. We are obtaining medical information, so to me, this seems like something that we probably need to revisit and look at the possibilities for what we may be able to do on our end. But totally understand the newness of this, and it does seem a little bit overwhelming, and thankful that we can all work together.
Joan, thank you. And it's so great the DAs are on the call today, just so they're learning more about what the changes are as well. We are going to move on to the Title VI self-survey. It's another thing that has been sent down the past couple of weeks that there are a ton of questions about. Before we get into the questions that were pre-submitted, I do want to say hello to Seth Wilson. He's associate counsel and the director of the Office of Civil Rights, and he has been working on this for us. And Seth, I want you to kind of set the stage for this survey and kind of what it means and how you guys are already planning to help out with the information regarding the survey.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lauren. And first of all, hello to all of you. I've worked with TEIS in a couple of different functions over the past year, but I know I haven't had the opportunity to meet or work with most of you. So it's a pleasure to do so. I love the mission of TEIS and thrilled that it's a part of DIDD. And to go along with that, as TEIS is now part of DIDD, I understand that at DOE there were different kinds of requirements for things. In this situation, when it comes to Title VI, I know one of the first questions that everybody has is, does this apply to me? Which is a good question. Under the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987, Congress clarified that Title VI, in fact, is incredibly broad. That's been reiterated both at the Tennessee Human Rights Commission and their rules and regulations, and in DIDD policy 60.1.1 in regards to Title VI compliance. So when it comes down to it, vendors, EIRAs, interpretive services, we take a broad view of this because THRC takes a broad view of it, and because federal law takes a broad view of it. Now, does that mean when you're looking at this and you provide services through TEIS or through a contract with DIDD, that every single part of this might make sense for what you do for the department or what you do through the contract and providing services to persons supported? It might not. If that's the situation, the purpose of the form is to encompass all of the services and programs that DIDD is involved with, and that we contract with different providers to provide. And so some of it might not be applicable to you. If that's the case, please enter NA. If you don't have that information, please say that we don't have that information. I am also sympathetic to the fact that I know the DOE would have had to provide information to the Tennessee Human Rights Commission. Somebody asked, is this the first year that vendors have to fill out the DIDD Title VI non-discrimination self-survey? It's the first year that anybody involved with TIS has to fill this out. That's because it's a DIDD form. It's the way that we have gone about complying with requirements from the Tennessee Human Rights Commission on certain required data that we all have to comply with under federal law for anybody who receives or is a subrecipient or recipient or sub-subrecipient of federal funds. So really, when it comes down to it, please just fill it out to the best of your ability. I understand with the demographics and other things that, walking into being under DIDD for this first year, I'm very sympathetic to a lot of changes happening. We just heard from licensure and all of those kind of requirements. And now you're hearing this kind of requirements, and I know it's a lot. I also know that maybe over the last fiscal year, which is applicable to this form, maybe you weren't keeping up with some of this information. And my guidance is just to do the best you can with what you have. When it comes to the first section, which I think is the one, I mean, whether you've received a complaint of discrimination, I think is something that you'd be aware of. Demographics might not, if you're not keeping track of that. My understanding, though, based on conversations with the TIS team, and I'll admit my own ignorance with some of the TIS, and I'm learning more about it every day and want to continue to learn more, is that in the TEIS system, the demographic information for persons receiving services and children receiving services is entered. There's two different categories of demographic information. There's race and there's what they refer to as ethnicity. That's a U.S. federal government standard. It comes from the Office of Management and Budget regarding their question of they don't consider Hispanic to be a race, and they consider that to be an ethnicity. So that's the difference between those two questions. If it's my understanding that information is entered into TEIS, and so we can do that in-house and as a whole for TEIS, and as a whole for what I need to present to the Tennessee Human Rights Commission and what they need to present to the federal government, which is on a whole for TIS by region and overall, what's the breakdown of race of individuals of Tennesseans who are being served. Important information, but if we can get that in-house, we will do that. If you have that readily available, please go ahead and put that on the form when you hand in the survey. But otherwise, if it's something that you just haven't been tracking because it's just you were not aware that you needed to track it this year, we can track down that information for you. But please go ahead and fill out the questions that you can answer. Also, I wanted to address something that I've seen a couple questions on. Section 4 on the LEP assessment. There's only a certain amount of languages mentioned there. I think it's a little confusing in the way that the little chart's set up there. And somebody asked, what about if we have other languages? I know there's a section to the right that says number and percentage, and it's doubled up. There's number percentage, number percentage. You could just mark somewhere what that language was. We'd love to have that information as well. And I guess I will open up to questions, but the last thing I do want to address is I know there's a number of agencies that contract with the department for a number of different services, including TEIS. If you are one of those agencies that does family support and TEIS or waiver services and TEIS, and you're going to submit all the information for all those services in one Title VI self-survey, that's more than okay. I would want that to be marked on here though, so we just don't think that under DIDD services offered. So we understand that TIS is included within that self-survey that's given to us. But that is more than fine. It does not have to be separated out. And we can work with that information. So that being said, Lauren, I'm sorry I just babbled on and on.
You're good. There's a lot of questions. Yeah, before we get into our questions, I want to bring in Amanda Schaefer, our Director of Operations. She can kind of tell you how this will work as far as filling in the holes on some of that information. Amanda?
Hi, everybody. I know several of you have reached out to me or your DAs or data and ops team members. So just to tie down what Seth has said to what you're going to do. So if you've reached out to me or if you have looked at the form and you're saying, I can't access this information in TEIS and I don't have it anywhere else, you're filling out the form with the information you do have. And then you're just noting, I don't have access to this, and you're sending it in. Our team is going to pull all the demographic data by agency, and we're going to send it to Seth, disaggregated as he needs it, and that will cover us. So Seth, correct me if I say anything out of line. But so I've received a lot of questions about how do I do this, or can you pull it for me? So I'm going to pull data, send it to Seth. So you're going to fill out the form to the best of your ability with the information that you do have. And that is what is going to occur. So what's not going to happen is any triangulation where I'm sending you data that you send to Seth. That's not the procedure. So you just send in what you know, and I'll send in what I know. And then Seth will work with our team to fill in any gaps. The only other thing I can see you may be asking is once I have pulled that or we have it on our team, if you're wanting to know your demographic data, we can sort that out. And probably Dave Williams actually brought it up this morning. We'll probably create a streamlined way to disseminate that to you because I can see probably some interest there. So that'll kind of be the second step here, but first we'll take care of the Title VI requirements. So I hope that cleared up any procedural questions for how we're going to accomplish this.
And Amanda, that's exactly right. So yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get to our pre-submitted questions and we'll take a look at the chat box. I think we've addressed some of these questions, but I don't think it's ever going to hurt to say it twice. First up, is there a TEIS report that we can pull up that gives us race information on our caseload for the Title VI report? Sounds like it's just not required, right? Because we'll fill in those gaps.
Yeah, that's something we'll do internally. If that information has already been provided through TEIS, then we have it. So we can take it from there. And again, if you have it readily available, please feel free to put it on the form. We'd appreciate that. If not, and it has been entered into TEIS some point over the last fiscal year, we have that data, so we can pull that. So we'll take care of it from there.
Okay. If the EIRA's lead agency completes the Title VI information, including our families, do we also need to submit it?
The answer is no there. So just one thing I will say is I know that some of the information was disseminated as far as the requirement to get us back to self-survey maybe a week or so after it went out to other providers. So I would just double check if your agency does more than just TIS and they already submitted something, just double check, did that include TIS information as well? But as far as the submission of multiple self-surveys, you don't need to do that. If the agency covers multiple services for the department, you can put that all into one self-survey and submit that.
Okay, Seth. This next question has to do with interpreters, and you may, after you answer this, just want to speak to that more broadly because I have gotten a lot of questions from interpreters just asking, are we included in this as well? But the question is, Title VI report for LEP assessment, page 3. In the list for all requests, it includes the date of request. Usually, EIs contact the interpreter company and schedule this directly. Do you have suggestions on how we will get this information since it could be over 500 email requests in a year? Could this date be general, like March of 2020?
It could. I'd just suggest, especially this first year dealing with this, just to give the information that you have available. you know, if you have that information on the data request, please feel free to provide that to us. But it's more than okay if that's broad, if that's down to a month. Just whatever you have readily available is what you have. You sign the form at the bottom that this is, to the best of my knowledge, what we are aware of, and that's what's presented to us. And again, you know, some places have 3 of these situations. That's kind of the more typical scenario for providers where that's where they're noting to us when that occurred, and we're kind of trying to pull that data to see what we could do with that to provide better services as far as limited English proficiency and across our service provider network. But if you don't have that information, just provide what you can.
Okay, thank you, Seth. One question, kind of looking forward, I don't know how much we know about this, but it says, so if information is in TEIS, do we need to track it ourselves going forward? So basically, looking ahead, is this something they need to start tracking?
Yeah, I would appreciate it, and we would prefer that you start tracking right now. I know in this situation, it's already July 21st. You know, if there could be 21 days that you haven't been tracking already, but as much as you can track this information going forward over the next year, that would be appreciated. I do know, again, though, in this scenario, unlike other programs under DIDD, that information is tracked because you are entering it. You're entering into the TEAT system. So we're going to have that information. That could be a backup. And for next year, I'm picturing us, quite honestly, being in the same situation because there's already been a few weeks going into this fiscal year where, you know, you haven't necessarily been tracking that information. From here on out, though, if you could, we would definitely appreciate it. But as long as that information is entered into TEADS, we have it and we have what we need to go forward and to comply with the federal requirements next year as well.
All right, Seth, thanks. So we have a hand raised, Bruce Burgess. If you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much. With respect, that sounded like a half an answer from Seth. Do I need to create a form that specifically says that Title VI requires me to, from TEIS, request that you give your race and ethnicity? Or is that something that seems to me to be confrontational, to say the least? We don't discriminate against white, black, brown, or blue. Is that something that is that a hill that you want to die on, or is that something that we can continue to rely on TEIS to do the IFSP?
I will die on that hill to protect blue people's rights, as you asked. No, this is required information for receipt of federal funds. This is not something that DIDD is coming up with. This is not only are you prohibited from discrimination in the provision of services, there are certain data that is required to be provided, including to make sure in the provision of services who that's going to, and that's given in a non-discriminatory way. And as far as federal requirements, we just can't change that. And I can't change that. Even the Tennessee Human Rights Commission can't change that. So as far as the gathering of data for how many times interpretive services are provided, and racial demographic information on who receives services, we are going to need to continue to provide that information to the federal government as part of the receipt of federal funds that come through us, that go out to provider networks to provide services. And I'm sorry if that's considered a half answer, but unfortunately, that's just a requirement of what we need to do. But if you want to talk further, I'd be happy to speak with you one-on-one more about that. And I'm
All right.
sorry, I'm in a part of your question that I'm not addressing here.
Yeah, and we know what we have gone to our hour, so I know folks are going to have to start wrapping up here soon. But Seth, thank you so much for that. And I can also provide Seth's email on this chat if anyone wants to talk with him directly. Amanda Shaver is going to chime back in on this, just as how her team is going to help.
First, I see, Darcy, your question, and that is correct. We are going to pull statewide data across agencies for Seth. So if you don't have access and don't have any of your own information, you are not filling that out. We have it covered. So your understanding is correct. Also, our team is going to look for ways to make a TEIS enhancement to ease this process. I just can't speak to that at this point today. So to Seth's point about moving forward and tracking it on your own, I think we're going to need to circle back to that at a future meeting, but we will continue to look for solutions that make sense for everyone.
Wonderful. And really quickly, for our vendor, Shannon Pargin has something she wants to mention.
Yeah, just something quick. Jill and I have been working on a project just to wrap up some of our Department of Education contract work. So you will likely be, this is for our vendors, but you will likely be receiving a contact from an individual. Her name is Summers Schumbert, and she has been working with us. What we're doing is we are wrapping up, so with our old vendor contracts that we had under Department of Education, we're just needing to make sure that all of those listed items that we're required to have documentation on in those contracts, that we actually had all of those pieces on file, and if we didn't, we just need to follow up. And so step one of that process is Summer reaching out to make sure that the people that we have listed as being employed during those dates of service, that we have those correct, and working with you on, if that's not correct, deactivating users from TEIS and some of those sorts of steps. So I just wanted to give you a heads up to anticipate for our vendors an email coming from Summer. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to Jill or myself. But those emails will start coming in, and those are just wrapping up those final pieces for those contracts. So that's all I have.
Shannon, thank you. We are going to go ahead and wrap up. I know some of you have some questions. Please send those to me and we'll work to get answers. If they're licensure related, you can also send those to your regional rep. Be on the lookout for some invites to some informational meetings about the licensure. I know this is a lot, guys, but hopefully throughout this hour, you realize that we're here to help and we're going to support you, and that we'll kind of get all this stuff done together. Any more questions, just send those to me, and I will get this recording posted on YouTube as soon as I can, so you can review it if you'd like. One other quick note, thank you guys for filling out that quick survey about office hours and the frequency. We are going to drop it down to monthly. That being said, we might need to talk back in 2 weeks just because we have a lot going on, but that will kind of be the plan going forward. So thank you guys so much for sticking with us. Thanks everyone for all the good answers as well. And we'll see you guys soon. Have a good day.